Welcome to the online information session on the Council's draft Environmental Sustainability Strategy, part of Council's online information session program. Before we begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay my respect to the ancestors' spirits, past and present, and also like to acknowledge and pay my respect to any Aboriginal persons joining us today. By way of introduction, my name is Peter Massey. I'm the Environment Manager at North Sydney Council, and Nikki Carey, the Senior Sustainability Programs Coordinator, who was responsible for pulling together this document. The purpose of today's session is to explain the key aspects of the project and provide you the opportunity to learn and ask any questions either now or during the session or through the link that I'll show you a bit later on. By way of housekeeping, this session is being recorded. We've made available on Council's website. And all participant microphones have been switched to mute throughout the session. But if you're participating via a computer or smart device, you can use the chat function to submit a question during the session. By way of consultation, the document's on public exhibition until the 28th of June. I mean, the whole point of the exercise is because the document has been produced by council staff, in essence, pulling together a number of different existing and past strategies that we've got in action plans. It's important that we get the community's advice on what we do, if we've got it right, if we missed something, if we missed the point, are we being realistic, or are we being too conservative? Do we need to be a little bit more ambitious in some of our targets? Anyway, but the strategy and feedback form are all at that link that's on the screen, your site, or Sydney, New South Wales.gov/sustainability strategy. So please have any comments or questions, put that on that and we'll endeavour to answer them as soon as possible. In terms of just an outline or an overview of what the document actually is, effectively, as I mentioned before, the document's been produced by council staff and it's effectively a natural progression from previous strategy and also existing council policies and action plans that were pulled together and consolidated into this particular document, this draft document. In essence, the document has 22 targets, all relating to what council wishes to achieve before 2030. Some of it before 2030, but in the main, most of them are aimed towards 2030 timeframe. Those documents or those targets are all in the following topics, if you want: carbon footprint, water conservation, water quality, community engagement in sustainability, urban ecology, resource recovery, and sustainable transport. And in order to achieve these targets, effectively there's been an action plan that's been produced with the document as well. Again, the action plan, just bear in mind, action plan is what we've produced here and now. It can be overtaken by developments, legislation, state and federal government legislation. So we're certainly keen to get input from community about these actions, and I'll pass over to Nikki to explain further.
Yep, great. Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. So I will take you through all of those 22 targets. That is quite a high level, and it is in those 7 sort of topic areas. And the action plan is on the website. We only had so much time and we couldn't go through everything, and the action plan is quite chunky as well. So I might leave you to go through that in your own time. And as Peter said, I think if we get the targets right, this is a strategic document. The actions will develop over time as new opportunities come up. So we don't want to, the action plan is a high-level action plan, and we're definitely not restricting ourselves to the actions that we've got in there. It will, we will be doing many more things to achieve those targets. So for me, it's really important to get the targets right. All right, so at a strategic level, sustainability is one of Council's core values, and that means that this document, I suppose, has a bit of meat. This document only relates to the environmental aspect of sustainability, not social, not economic. They're obviously all interrelated, but this document itself is specific to the environmental sustainability outcomes that Council is working towards. As Peter mentioned, it does build on other strategies. It's not that this is the first time we're doing this, and it also links into other strategies. So this influences other aspects of Council's delivery program. It's also aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and you'll see those referenced throughout the document. It's informed by ABS data, by Council data, state, national plans and strategies, and also a lot of work that Council commissioned consultants to conduct to make sure that the targets that we have forecast are evidence-based. So the vision that this document has grown out of comes from community consultation, but it is a couple of years old now. So one thing I'm keen to hear back from through the consultation process is to make sure that the vision is still current, topical, and if there is something that's missing, we're keen to make sure that is captured, so that we're helping to achieve that vision. So I'm just going to go through all of those points. They are in the strategy. So the community told us that they want, what they want for North Sydney in 2030 is for North Sydney to be sustainable, that the natural environment is able to sustain the effects of population growth, that the natural environment is accessible to all without compromising environmental values, that North Sydney has a framework of green spaces and corridors linking bushland, waterways and parks, and that natural environments are appealing and enjoyable, and that the natural environment is defined by extensive bushland and Sydney Harbour, where foreshore access has been maximised. North Sydney has an integrated transport system by 2030 that makes it easy to get into and around the area. North Sydney has a wide choice of transport. People can walk, cycle, take public transport or drive a vehicle. And public transport is efficient, offering a good alternative to cars. Car ownership will decrease as more people take up car share options, and bike paths are well maintained, well utilised, and are not perceived as an eyesore. So that's up front what we heard from the community that we should be striving towards. So now I'm going to delve into each of those 7 topic areas, and I'll pull out some of the recent achievements in this space, just that you know what Council has already done, and then therefore what the opportunities are moving forward, and also where we see ourselves being in 10 years' time or in 9 years' time, 2030. So Council has done a lot of work around reducing its carbon emissions, and declared a climate emergency 2 years ago in July 2019. We were the 30th council in Australia to do that. Council set its first greenhouse gas reduction targets for its own operations as well as for the community back in 2002, and achieved a 32% reduction in emissions across its own operations, and also helped contribute to an 18% reduction within the North Sydney community emissions profile in 2017, and that's compared to 1996 levels. So where do we want to be in 2030? Council will be purchasing 100% renewable electricity for its own operations. And you can see that where we're sitting at the moment is 54%. By 2030, we want to achieve carbon neutrality for council operations. And we want to support the community to achieve 25% emission reductions from its 1996 emission levels. In the water space, Council also set water reduction targets and action plans for its own operations and the community back in 2004, and it's achieved 44% reduction in its own water use across council operations, and has seen a 7% reduction in the community in 2017, and that's again compared to 1996 levels. Actually, I think that's a typo. I think that should be 2004 levels. By 2030, we want to get, we're currently sitting, in 2016-17, we were sitting at 44% reduction. By 2030, we want to be at 50, we want to be using half the amount of water that we're using in 2001, 2002. We want to work with the community to help realise a reduction of 10%, and that figure is currently sitting on 7%. Water quality, that really relates to stormwater quality in North Sydney. Some of our achievements particularly relate around keeping litter out of the harbour, out of the waterways. Street sweeping and pit cleaning have removed more than 3,000 tonnes of material in 2019. Our SQUIDs, or stormwater quality improvement devices, have removed another 500 plus tonnes of material. We've also installed 5 water sensitive urban design systems in the council area, and that's to reduce flooding, nutrients and sediment load. And our Harbour Care volunteer program has also removed almost 7 tonnes of materials from our foreshore areas in one year alone, which is pretty phenomenal. So from there, we want to achieve 70% compliance with Australian and New Zealand guidelines for fresh and marine water quality. We're currently sitting at 65%. We want 90% of our catchment to be treated by stormwater quality improvement devices by 2030. We're currently sitting just shy of 60%. And we want to keep an additional 10% of material out of our waterways by 2030. By increasing the amount of stormwater catchment that is treated by 2030, that will definitely help us achieve that target. All right, hope you're still with me. Got a few more to go. North Sydney, the North Sydney community is very engaged in the sustainability space. So we've got a lot of targets that relate specifically to how the community contributes to improving the environmental outcomes in North Sydney, and that's what we've called engagement in sustainability. But every year we put on more than 100 workshops that relate to sustainability, to and other environmental sustainable living type workshops every year, including last year over COVID, where we took our program online. Over the last 10 years, bushland volunteers have contributed an astounding 57,500 hours of volunteer work to help improve the bushland in North Sydney. We provide ongoing support to our local business community through programs like City Switch and the Better Business program, which works directly with local businesses to identify areas where they can reduce the impact they're having, and also to celebrate sustainable leadership. More than 10,000 participants, more than 10,000 people have participated in our education programs in 2018-19. We've been providing school grants for the last 10 years. And we have almost 100 apartment buildings participating in our Future Proofing Apartments program, which helps reduce particularly the energy demands of those buildings. So with that as a platform to jump off from, we want to continue to engage more people in our program. So we want to increase that to 12,000 by 2030, so 12,000 people per year. And we want to maintain our really high level of motivation for people who attend our programs to be able to then take what they've learned and be able to implement some of those actions. Around urban ecology, Council has been undertaking bushland rehabilitation work since the mid-80s. And as a result of that, we've seen the return of a number of plant and animal species that were previously not seen or were previously locally extinct. We've supplied more than 10,000 local plants to residents in the last 15 years. We've implemented bushland buffer zones in our development plans, and that's to obviously improve or reduce the stresses on our remnant bushland. We developed an urban forest strategy in 2019, and we work with universities to improve the sustainability and the habitat values of the seawalls that line much of our foreshore area. Currently, our bushland is classed as being in good condition. Sorry, 75% is being classed as being in good condition. We want to keep working on that, and we want to hit 80% by 2030. We want to maintain or increase how many native animals and plants, the species that we found compared to the survey that was undertaken in 2010. And our urban forest strategy that I mentioned just now has identified a roadmap for us to achieve a total canopy cover of 34.4%, very precise, by 2030. Okay, we're at the tail end now. Resource recovery, so waste. Some of the achievements that Council has made over the last few years is opening and managing a community recycling centre in Artarmon on behalf of a number of surrounding councils. We adopted a single-use plastics policy a couple of years ago. We were the first council in New South Wales to introduce an e-waste collection system. We were also the first council to introduce a volume-based garbage charge system, and that was to encourage smaller bins and also to incentivise recycling. And we were the first to offer worm farming and composting, as well as green cleaning workshops in New South Wales. So a few firsts there. Over the next few years, we want to help our community reduce the amount of household waste that is being produced by another 10% based on current levels. And we want to see 80% of recycling rates for solid waste. Some of you may have heard very exciting news in the last couple of days that the state government has reduced its latest waste strategy, and that is going to, so you'll see here we had a 70% diversion target from landfill. The state target that has just been announced is for 80%, so we will change this target to reflect that. The exciting thing is, once the state government has made that commitment, we know that there is going to be support and infrastructure to help us achieve that. And just looking internally as well, relating back to Council's single-use plastics policy, we also want to wipe out all unnecessary single-use plastics within Council's own operations before 2025. Okay, this is the last sort of topic area, that is sustainable transport. So 4 years ago now, Council developed its transport strategy, which implemented a modal transport hierarchy, which prioritises walking and works its way all the way down, with the last option being private vehicles, and how Council supports that modal shift going forward. Council's installed 7.5 kilometres of cycle paths and cycle routes upgrades between 2015 and 2019. We've installed 120 plus bike parking rails over the same period. And we've seen a growth of car share spaces to almost 150 in the last 10 years. And we've installed 10 electric vehicle chargers in our car parks a couple of years ago in 2019. By 2030, we want to work with the community to see a shift to 85% of residents and workers travelling to and from work using modes of transport other than sole occupant vehicles. You can see residents particularly are doing quite well on that front already. We need to work a bit on workers. And 25% of households having no car at all currently, or in the last census, we were sitting at 16.4%. By 2030, we expect to see 50% of new car sales to be non-internal combustion engine vehicles, so largely electric vehicles. A long way to go. And we want to reduce Council's own fleet by 10% compared to 2019 levels. And we want that fleet to be electric, excluding some equipment that is not available currently, or we don't expect to be available by 2030 as an electric, that we don't expect there to be electric options available. Excluding that, we expect our entire fleet to be electric by then. Again, we're starting from zero, so we've got a way to go. So that's the strategy in a nutshell. As I mentioned, there is also an action plan to help us achieve those targets. We're a couple of weeks into consultation and we've had a few submissions made already. So far, people are agreeing or strongly agreeing with the vision that I went through at the beginning. Priorities that were identified as, so we've said, tell us if there is something that you want us to really focus on. If there's something that we could achieve before 2030, what would that be? And a couple of things have come through a number of times, and that is, let's treat as much stormwater as we can. Let's try and hit that 90% stormwater catchment target by 2025. And let's also hit that 70% or probably now 80% waste diversion from landfill target by 25 rather than 2030. And there were also a number of sort of specific suggestions made around actions that we should consider incorporating. So I think that's it from me now. I know that was a lot to take in, but I'm sure you've all read the strategy already. And we have had a couple of questions these were a couple of questions that were sort of posted before tonight, so we just thought we'll go through those, and I think I've thrown Peter in the hot seat for that.
Yeah, Nikki may have mentioned that it was only a couple of days ago actually, the state government, and it relates to waste, and these particular questions you got up and through relates to, you know, plastic and single-use plastics and recyclables, and what pressure should be brought to bear on businesses in terms of their use of plastics. And to a large degree, the plastic situation is a little bit out of council's control because, I mean, we respond to encouraging our own operations to be plastic free as much as possible and the like, but where businesses or residents are involved, we don't have the power to legislate or to force people to do certain actions, and that's fine and that's good. But the New South Wales government, or state governments and the federal governments do have a lot more influence in that regard. So those two questions there, in fact, only 2 days ago, the state government brought out a plastics action plan that talked about the phasing out of single-use plastics and plastics that aren't recyclable, giving businesses a certain number of years to phase them out of operation. That would all depend on, in terms of the timeframes associated with them, would depend on when the legislation actually goes through Parliament, but they're looking at sort of a 2 or 3 year timeframe for businesses to get rid of single-use plastic. And they've got, if you go through the website, there's a New South Wales Plastic Action Plan. It goes through in a lot more detail than I'm describing now, but so that should address those questions. In terms of the questions that have come up in the chat, some of them we'll probably have to take on notice because we can't give an answer now or anything comprehensive now anyway. But the first question relates to an agreed emergency. Why target set for 2030 and not somewhat sooner, say 2024? Do you want to give an explanation about the time frame that we've used and why we've used 2030?
Yeah. Yeah, look, that is it's a good question, and we have, it is a strategy to 2030, and we have tried. So we have tried to link all of our targets to that level. Where we haven't, there is one exception, that is for single-use plastics, and that is because even before the state government waste strategy, I can't remember its name. 20-year
waste strategy.
Yep, the one that came out a couple of days ago. There was another, there is another strategy in place, and that's there is another strategy in place around single-use plastics at a national level, and that is to 2025. So we wanted to link our council target to the same level. So, if there is a strong feeling that we should be more ambitious around the, particularly the carbon footprint targets, there is nothing to say that we can't bring those targets forward. All of the 2030 targets say before 2030, so there's nothing to stop us, obviously, from hitting those goals sooner. But as I said, if we get the feedback that, look, this is something that, we, the North Sydney community, feel strongly about, that we should be hitting earlier, then we can do that. But we need, this is what this process is about. We need to hear that if this is a local priority. Absolutely.
So in terms of just following on, mentioning sustainable growth, any limits to growth, I will probably have to take that on notice. This is part of all of this will be included in the consultation, and we then have to get back to council when we report back in terms of the outcomes of the consultation. Some of the questions that people asked, some of the comments. So council is aware of what the community are thinking about all these different things. So I'll have to take that one on notice. In terms of the stormwater harvesting goals, we have targets set for water consumption in terms of our own operations. We've currently hit that 44%, I think it was, the current achievement through stormwater harvesting at St Leonard's Park. And interestingly enough, the Transport for New South Wales, I think it's the Western Harbour Tunnel, is going to impact on that in the short term. but we'll go into further details about that. But we haven't actually got stormwater harvesting goals, but I can take that on notice. That's not a problem.
Yeah. I guess I would say that, as Peter said, the large stormwater reuse system that is installed at Camaray Golf Course is a huge contributor to helping us achieve the 44% that we're sitting on at the moment. So to get to another 50%, and water's quite difficult, as we found, we will need to look at non-potable water options, which may include, and is likely to include, more stormwater harvesting. But we've got to identify those sites. We've got to, so that is, it's not a specific target, but it will help us achieve the potable water use target, if that makes sense.
So going on further, are you intending to recognise personal electric transport devices as a growing transport mode and have policies? I would have to admit I'm not an expert on sustainable transport. We've had other council staff that are a bit more au fait in that topic area that give comments, but we can take that on board and we'll ask for comments from the relevant council staff, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I'm thinking about how, if we go to that section in the plan and the targets that we have identified, we're talking about helping residents get out of single occupant cars. I would say that would include personal electric vehicles. Not vehicles. I can't see it now. Sorry, move off the screen.
Oh, sorry.
I can't see it.
No, it's just here.
Fine.
It's here. Yeah.
Okay.
That's electric transport devices.
Yeah, and likewise, getting people to move off cars into other more sustainable forms of transport. We're identifying electric vehicles as a more sustainable form of transport. So, look, yes, Peter's right. We do need to maybe take that off. I'm just thinking out loud. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Okay.
Our question was assisting apartments, including solar on rooftops. So that's our apartments program. Yep.
Does assisting? Yes, it does. So our future-proofing apartments program includes rooftop solar. It's obviously part of the solution, and the proportion of rooftop to apartment is obviously much more limited. But can contribute particularly to powering the base building. But yes, it is included as part of the assessment that we provide to the participants of the Future Proof Apartments program. So, yeah.
The next question talks about hybrid vehicles in terms of they can have fossil fuel usage and charge their own batteries. That would be a good transition option. Yep. Says it's more a comment, I guess. 9 years isn't really all that long. How will you track, say, year by year, how you're going against the targets?
Yep. So yes, they are a transition. I suppose we're maybe looking at the end game and just seeing all the signals that are coming out from the vehicle manufacturers, is that by 2030, a big proportion of them, the majority of them, will just be producing electric vehicles anyway. How we're tracking, how we find out how we're tracking is through ABS data. So they record that information about local EV sales. Obviously, this isn't something that council can directly influence, but it is something that we can help support and that we can help advocate for.
Yeah, so I've just reinforced the fact that all the comments here will go as part of the consultation comments we reported back to council. And in terms of just wrapping the session up, again, just to harp on it, the public exhibition goes until the 28th of June. Please tell us where we've got it wrong, where we've got it right. Any comments at all we'll take on board. That won't be a problem. And in terms of just going through and finding that link, the draft strategy feedback form, you'll say it, North Sydney, at that link.
Which you can get to from the council website.
Yep.
Yep.
So I think we'll wrap that up if everyone's okay with that.